Hello, comic watchers. I'm trying to be as loud as Matt is, and he's super excited to bring us in, but he's not here this week. So I'm going to stumble my way through as a host for episode 118 of the Comic Watchers Show, joined as always by Mike Eakins. And this week we have the incredibly famous writer, Loui Southard of Midnight Western Theater, coming at Scout Comics this March.
Whoa, it's me. Yes. Yes, I am the incredibly famous writer, as we all know. Don't have to tell anybody that. I'm the writer and co-creator of Midnight Western Theater, as you said, coming from Scout Comics next month, March 17th. Everybody get your pencil, your pen, go to your calendar. Mark down, that's the day to get the book.
That is the day.
Thank
David
you,
Hans at penciling and inking, Ryan Cody at colorist, Buddy Boudon and letterer, and cover art by Kalman Andrasovsky. Sorry if I butchered the name.
He has the pronunciation of his name in his Instagram bio. Like he spells it out syllable by syllables. And Andrasovsky. Made sure to memorize that in case I ever had to talk to him in person. And no bad first impressions, right?
Right. So it looks like we've got an incredibly exciting book here coming from Scout. For our readers who may not be familiar with it, what is the pitch for Midnight Western Theater?
2 words: goth cowboys. That's pretty much the inception behind it. And if you want to get a little more specific with it, it's about 2 adventurers, supernatural adventurers, if you will, who go on episodic journeys that go through the heart, the mind, and potentially through violent means on each issue, as they trek through the 1860s Wild West of the United States of America. So each issue bounces around between story to story with the same 2 protagonists, and get into some pretty wild stuff. That's all I'm going to say about that.
It is incredibly wild. We're lucky enough to get a little sneak peek into the first issue, and I cannot promote this book enough. If you know anything about me, you know vampires, you know westerns, I'm in. I'm sold on this. We got sent the cover image, and I immediately just scrambled to see who I can get a hold of to talk to about this book, because it's just something that every now and then a book will come along where you feel like it was just made for you. And there's no way you're not buying it off the shelf. This is that book for me. So, thanks again for joining us. I'm just super excited to hopefully have more people look at this book.
Well, thank you for inviting me. That was a very pleasant tweet to see when you commented about the book, because it's just like I had another book come. This is my sophomore book. My first book was Villain Seeking Hero, which was a supervillain comedy drama from Action Lab Entertainment. Now it's self-published because I don't like them anymore. But this being that book got like little to no attention, but the reviews it got were good, which was a good sign if you're a writer. Like, oh, people like the writing. I'm like, okay, that's all I needed to know. And with this book, when it was announced, it was a positively different reception, where people just by visuals alone were keen on trying to figure out what the hell this book is about, and just wanted to either pick it up or just get to it eventually. So yeah. I hope the visuals will allure people, and I hope the story will keep people, or will have people want to stay. There we go.
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to get into how these characters are alluring people maybe in a little bit. But I want to talk a little bit about the inspirations for what brought this series into existence. I mean, how do you come up with an idea like Midnight Western Theater?
That's a doozy of a question. Well, the story that I've maintained, and it's a story that the company wanted to put in the press release, was around the time I was working on Villain Seeking Hero. I used to go to a Starbucks back when the world was normal, and I would sit down and write. And when you want to write, oftentimes you don't, and you're just distracted. And I was thinking a lot about Westworld at the time. I was listening to a lot of I think The Cure. And then And then I'm looking out the window, and then all my synapses fire, electric sparking. And I just thought to myself, goth cowboys, not seen that before. And the second I utter that in my mind, I was like, wait a minute. And I ran home. This part's more so true. I ran home and I just sketched out designs for the two main characters, Hortensia Thomas, the woman in black, and Alexander Wortham, the reluctant vampire. I just sketched them out because part of the idea of trying to come up with this story was based on another sort of pitch I was coming up with, where I liked the idea of a character dynamic where there was a normal person, like no real special abilities about them, and they're paired with somebody with extraordinary abilities, like, someone who could pretty much do anything. And I like the idea that in that pairing, someone would be more afraid of the normal person. I think that's more like the Batman Superman approach. Batman comes at you in the alley, you're gonna shit your pants. Superman comes, you say, "Oh, I'm gonna shake your hand." Like that's the sort of thing. But Superman can throw you into the sun, and like it's that kind of thing. So coming up with this book, that was sort of the idea with the characters, where Hortensia Thomas, she is I would say our main protagonist, and she's just your grade A typical Western badass. She's just there to do the job, to kill whoever's in the way. And very no nonsense, very much, I got a job to do, I'm going to do it. And like, she'll just break your leg if you're a mild inconvenience. And I like the idea that she's paired with a vampire, because this book's supernatural. I'm like, what's the most approachable sort of monster? And I'm like, a vampire. And I like the idea the vampire on paper is a murder machine, but given the character, that can't be anything but otherwise. That being Alexander Wortham, who is a gentleman's gentleman, and he's just there to complain and to whine and to let Hortensia and the reader know that he's not having any of this. And I like that a lot, where that guy could rip you to pieces, but but everybody's annoyed by him. Nobody's intimidated by him. I mean, like in the first issue, he gets knocked out just for like barely defending himself. It's just like, It's like, hey, you're bothering me. He's like, I'm bothering you. Like, you're the one talking to me. And then that starts a confrontation. So that's very much, yeah, those are the characters. Oh, yeah, no, the original question was, how did you come up with this? Yeah, that's pretty much it. And what I think I wrote after I came up with the idea, or at least the characters, I wrote the first two scripts, and then I contacted David Hahn because we had worked together on an issue of Villain Seeking Hero, the first book before, and he did a one-shot. And the one-shot in that, like the protagonist of the one-shot was a goth girl. So, and he only wanted to do it because the main character was a goth girl. So I'm like, oh, I know what this guy likes. so I sent him an email. I'm like, hey, dude, goth cowboys. And he's like, I'm in. So we started a book from there. And then we got the whole crew after that. We got Ryan Cody, who I think did a fantastic job on coloring. Yeah. Very different type of palette, which is very nice to see. And we got, Buddy Beaudoin is my long, faithful and suffering letterer for all my projects. So it was nice to have him come back. And Kalman, he did promotional material for me for Villain Seeking Hero. So I'm like, this guy's fucking awesome. I'm just going to have him do the covers. And that was that. That's how I got the dream team together. And that's how the book was born.
And there we have it. And that's a pretty worthy story, because this is such an exciting book. And I love that you got on the tangent of the character dynamics, because that's really what this story is about. It's a pretty character-driven story, even though there are some high concepts to it. But it feels like it's very driven.
High concepts? What book did you read?
There's a couple of points where I was really just glad you committed to the horror of it.
No. I got to stop you right here, because you're just gonna misadvertise this book. Don't go diluting people with the idea that this is a high fantasy horror. No. This is sexy goth cowboy pew pew bang bang book. That's what this is. That's what I'm marketing it as. So,
I love it.
Don't muddy
it's very
the
much
waters.
that. There's no getting around it.
Don't muddy the waters. We're not trying to sell this as something it's not. There are some, and there are okay, sure. There's some. I don't want to use. I almost feel pretentious using this word, but there's some nuance to it, I guess, especially in later issues. I'd say like it's a 5-issue run. And I'm sorry for interrupting you. I know you were about to set up a whole thing, but it's a 5-issue run. Issue 4 and 5 are sort of like a two-parter, a spiritual two-parter, where they kind of bookend each other, and that's really where we get into some of the more deeper aspects of the book. Just to use that, but I'd say the first 3. And I know you two read the first 2, or at least hopefully you read the first 2. And the first 3 are very much like, nah, fuck it. We're going to kill everyone. Good guy kills the bad guy or defeats the bad guy. You never know what's going to happen. It's very much that. But yeah, so anyway, please continue.
No, I think it's a good time to bring Scoop in. I've shunned him for a good 10 minutes now because I'm too excited about this book. Please take it away, Scoop.
No, that's good. I'm glad that I wasn't the only one listening to like Sisters of Mercy and The Cure while reading these stories. This is good. I'm on the right track. Now, one thing I noticed about the book is that it has like that horror, good cheesy humor towards it. Like there's a little bit of ripping your face off. There's a little bit of comedy with Alexander where he just kind of, like we were talking about before, my favorite panel probably in all of comics, where he is just yelling, "I'm an American," right before he's getting ready to kill people. I still think that needs to be on a t-shirt, by the way.
You never know what could happen.
Yeah, I never know, right? Options open. But with the timing and the pacing with the characters kind of offsetting each other, was that always the plan when you were creating this, or did it kind of change maybe organically after like the layouts and you and David were kind of getting everything together? How did the timing work?
The timing, as in like how's everything set up in the book? Yeah, like aesthetically and like. No, please.
No, I was saying just like at the timing with the characters and how they're kind of working off each other and where they can balance each other out.
Well, I write full scripts, and they're often set up to, I guess, to best feature punchlines when jokes are set up and grand reveals. I know that's definitely important. I often monitor which pages I'm working with, because I think like, okay, when someone's flipping through the book, how's it going to go? So like if I want to do a big, I know issue 2, the antagonists are a cult. And the big reveal is who the cult leader is. So I made sure that like it's time. So when you flip the page, so your left-hand page of the book is going to be the splash page of the full cult leader. So that's very much set up to, I guess, have maximum surprise and effect. While with punchlines, I don't know. I very much think, or just with dialoguing and sort of separating the panel layouts and whatnot. I just kind of set it up how I think would be best organically. I feel like if you can have like repetitive bouncing off each other, you can sort of do that in one panel. But if you want to highlight what a character's saying, then you just save that for one panel by itself. David really was good at sort of maintaining the structure of the script. He didn't really deviate too much. And when he did, it was often just to be like, oh, you don't need that panel, which is fine. You want to save as much space as possible to have the best overall image. But yeah, that's often, thought ahead of time, because you want it to read well enough. And especially if you want to have tonal shifts and sort of, I guess even genre shifts, because I feel issue 1 is the best example of that, because the way I wanted to set it up is it starts off like a normal-ish kind of Western, where the main antagonists are just an outlaw gang. And as the issue progresses, it descends into madness. And the reason why is because that's when the main characters show up, and then they're slowly revealed as to what they actually are. So yeah, I hope that answered the question. Otherwise, it's just me being like a technical bastard, being like, okay, this is how it is. Let me tell you how it is.
No, that's great, because I mean, that's one thing that's really enjoyable about the story, is that there's a good blend of, you know, horror and backstory, and then like you almost get that comedic break, and then you're back at the story, and then you're back at the horror without it being kind of overdone and over embellished. So there's a great balance of it that I'm definitely looking forward to for the next couple of issues, and especially like you said, if 4 and 5 are that kind of, you know, tying it all together. Definitely looking forward to more.
Yeah, I part of the reason why I wanted to do, since you brought up like tying it all up in the end, I don't want to say flat out like, oh, this book is an ending, because I'm always open to like a sequel opportunity. If Scout is like, Lewis, we need a sequel right now, I'll be like, yeah, sure, like I could do it, and I've thought about a sequel. But given my experience with my last book, it was all set up to be like, oh, it's going to be this long Hickman-esque story, and it's like each issue feeds into the next, and it's all going to have a big payoff. And then a fucking virus came and wiped out all my plans.
Oh,
And my book and the first book, Villain Seeking Hero, ended on a cliffhanger. And that cliffhanger was like when maximum interest appeared, because it's like a big reveal in the story. And then because of the pandemic and because of issues with that company, that book and the interest, poof, gone. So it's like, okay, I've learned my lesson in that regard. So I basically like shorter, at least for this, I wanted a short story that if it doesn't get a sequel, people could read it, enjoy it, and it feels satisfying at the end. That you're not going to feel like, oh no, this is going to continue, and I'm going to be missing out on the next story. Like, no, you can just read it, and it's good. And I think that's part of the reason why I like how it's episodic, which is very missing from modern day comics. I feel there are some good examples. I know Ice Cream Man is an excellent example of more standalone comics nowadays. But of course, that has a certain level of continuity to it that will keep more interested readers eyeing on it, because there seems to be an overarching story. And Midnight Western Theater has that element too. There is a continuity, there is a consistency. Every issue opens with like 3 pages that tell one story. So that takes place in the past. So if you read all of it, you'll get the full story, and you can piece it together, and it's all going to be great. And you'll pick up the little references, and you'll look at the dates because each issue is a different year, and you'll figure out the timeline. It's all great. But if you're just some guy or some average Joe goes to the comic shop, sees the goth cowboy and cowgirl on the cover, and be like, ooh, that's neat. Pick it up, read it. And it's like, that was fun, and then toss it out. Like, great, they got the story. You got one story. It made sense. There was a beginning, middle, and end, and that my job's done. You know, so I'm appealing to sort of both audiences, which is nice, I feel.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because the first issue definitely does have this episodic feel. And I'm right there with you that I think that's such a strong approach in comics now, where you can do the Hickman thing, but it feels like it's been overdone and it's just not accessible to readers. And breaking into indie comics isn't something that a lot of long-term readers are looking to catch up on 100 issues where there's this huge, unraveling plan. But the accessibility of a comic that you can just pick up, and I feel like issue 2 does get into that as well, where if you just started in issue 2, it would still be a really cool time. But there is this consistency to it, like you said. It feels, I think, like some of my favorite stories, like Mignola's Hellboy, operates a lot along those lines, where they're pretty short takes on, these little mini adventures and things like that happening. Is that something that you plan on continuing throughout the rest of this volume and potentially other volumes as well?
Volume 1's very much built on episodic adventures. Each one is a different tale. And as I mentioned, it's set in a different year. So you get to see the characters at different points in their relationship and their lives. So like you'll see one. I think issue 2 is a good example. It's the second earliest one, and they're close, but they're not as close. I think one of my best favorite exchanges in that one is she says, Hortensia says to Alexander, like, "You trust me, don't you?" And he's like, "I'm not sure." like it's that sort of thing. And then later on, when you see like the latest point in the timeline, they're like as close as can be. And what's fun is because it bounces, at least in volume 1, because it bounces around in the timeline. The earliest one, you get to see them in their different designs, like their pre-Midnight Western Theater designs, and that was pretty cool. Kelman had designed Alexander's appearance, and David had designed Hortensia's appearance for that specific issue. That one's just fun because you get to see like this sort of year 1 Hortensia and Alexander, which is very much fun and different. But in terms of the future, I've been often thinking about that in how I would see this continuing, and I feel it would just depend on audience reception, because I have 2 ideas for a sequel. And one would be, they would both be 6 issues. And the first one would be one story told throughout all 6 issues. And that would be like the Hortensia year 1, which is how the protagonist learned all the skills about how to become a monster hunter and a badass and a gunslinger and all that. And that would be that. Because it's kind of set up, but yeah, that's the one I'm leaning towards. But if people are like, we demand more Hortensia and Alexander, we want that. We want more episodic adventures. And if you can't give it to us, you're a hack fraud writer. And then I'd be like, okay, because I do have like a little document on my phone that's pretty much like more. I do like, it's not like I came up with it like as an emergency just in case, like, okay, if people want this, like they'll get it. No, it's very much, I don't want to write something just because I want to write something because I want to write it.
Yeah.
And that's what that is. I have more episodic adventures as well. So as I say, but in the end, I say, it's based around audience reception. Like, I don't care. Probably at the end of all this, I'm just going to write what I want to write. And I'm only going to do it if Scott wants it. If they're like, Lewis, we need this, then I'll be like, sure. But if they're like, Lewis, fuck off, then I'm like, okay, yeah, that's fine. That's fair too. I'll work on something else. And that's kind of the reason, what I was saying about earlier, where my main hope, if it continues, excellent. If it doesn't, it's going to be fine. I think that's kind of my main mission with this, that no matter what, the book's going to be fine.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because it works well, particularly with the Western format or the genre, because it's something that feels familiar. A lot of Westerns operate like that. Jonah Hex, one of the long-running ones, pretty much is just a bunch of one-shots and occasionally 2-parters. But it feels like it's something that fits well within. I don't think that this really taps too much into a spaghetti Western vibe, but it has that heavy Western aesthetic where it does lean more horror, but it works for this episodic feel.
Yeah, I would agree. I know the Man with No Name was certainly a big inspiration for Hortensia, at least personality-wise, where it's just like this kind of stoic, just I don't want to use the word weirdo, but yeah, he's kind of like this. Because when I think of him, when I think about like those stoic badasses in film and television and books and whatnot, I often think like, you've got probably some antisocial issues. Like before Boba Fett became an actual character in The Mandalorian, like in the original Star Wars films, I often thought like, he's probably weird. Like you probably wouldn't want to. He probably doesn't know how to be your friend. So just stand there silently. So I sort of wanted that character because I guess that would be a good way to put Hortensia. I guess she's somewhat antisocial, which kind of puts her in some interesting situations, especially later on when the book kind of gets more personal. So that's part of it. But in terms of full-on spaghetti Western, listen, I don't know what this book is. I'm going to be real with you because it's just like let me tell you a story. So my editor, Andrea Molinari, he wrote The Shepherd, if you know what that book is. And he one day I was grocery shopping, right? As normal people do. And I check my phone and I have 2 missed calls I have text messages, I have emails, and I have like DMs from Andrea, my editor, being like, "You need to talk to me right now." And I see all that. I'm like, "Shit, I'm fired!" Like, and I'm like, "What did I do?" Like, I'm trying to. Did I say something? Did I do something? And I call him right away because now I'm nervous, and I'm like, "Andrea, what's up?" And he's like, "Oh, hey, Lewis. Yeah, I've been sitting at this computer trying to figure out a log line for this book, and I can't." And I'm like, so I figured I'd call you. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Like, it's just some stupid bullshit as opposed to like the end of the world falling on my lap. So then it's just like us for half an hour just being like, Twilight Zone meets The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's like, no, it's just like us just going back and forth. I think what we settled with this was Pale Rider meets Tales from the Crypt. I think that's the log line we sort of came up with. And that's not the best, but that's what we settled on. And because this, I think that's to the benefit of this book too, to a certain level. It's somewhat, and it's not somewhat. It is rather unique. Like I've not seen, and the writer of the creator of the book thinks it's unique and amazing and special. Whoa, who would have thought? But it's very different, and it's part of the reason why I wanted to make it, because I'm like, I've not seen anything like this before, so I'll just make it and I'll see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we talked about it a little bit before we got started, but honestly, the log line for this book is a bisexual dream, because Astensia and Alexander are like, as soon as I saw them on the cover, I was like scrolling through the thread hoping I can already see some like thirst fan art, because I mean, this is what I want. How do you feel about that? Is it a winning notion maybe for a log line that Scout would go for, or?
That's all I wanted. That's all I wanted for this book. It just meant that I did my job, that everything worked out in the end. But those designs are killer. I'm very happy with how they turned out, especially with David's art and Ryan's coloring. And I mentioned this off mic, but I'll say this story too. Why not? I'll say both. Like I noticed, like on a the first like thirst tweet I saw was somebody had commented like on the variant cover artist's cover, like who's the lady? And I'm like, oh great, it's starting. And then the most fun one was when I got a DM from just some stranger saying like, hey, I followed you because that vampire guy's pretty hot. And I'm like, oh, thanks for letting me know that. And I did get another message from that person being like, telling me what that character's personality is, because I posted another image of the character. The book's not out yet, right? They don't know anything about this book. And I posted another image of the two characters together, and they commented like, this character looks deadly, like a predator, but I could be friends with them. And I'm like, well, I guess you're not wrong. Like, I guess that's what the character is. But
I mean, it's pretty alluring. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
no,
I mean, the Mummy has nothing on this book. I mean, really.
No, that's great. No, I that's the bisexual dream that my friend coined that, because he's just like, that's what this. Yeah, it very much is. I often make the joke that the main two characters are the couple at the bar that ask you to be their unicorn. If you know what that means, they eye you up. It's like, hey, I like your vibe. Like, let's talk, like that sort of thing. But
Alexander does have those vibes. Like, maybe he's a little too kind for that, but Astensia may be a bit more forward. Don't get me started on it. I mean, I'm hoping that there is a volume 2, so hopefully we can play into that a little bit more. But there's going to be some tweets on that one for sure. I'm sure there's more coming your way.
Yeah, when the book comes out, I hope I get Rule 34 to all hell. I really hope that happens. I just want people to tweet at me like, hey, I drew your character getting fucked by a horse. And it's like, oh, thank you so much. That's all I ever wanted. That's great. I love the internet. Like
the internet might take things a little too far sometimes, and hopefully it doesn't happen here, because
what's shocking?
Great characters.
what's shocking is in my superhero book, the Villain Seeking Hero book, like the female characters in that one, like there's one that I'm like, this one's gonna get like fucking so much attention just based on the design alone, and nobody cared. And then people are telling me, hey, this like Revolutionary War looking vampire guy, like he's the hot piece of ass we've all been looking for. And I'm like, okay, like sure, I'll take it.
And take it, we will. I'm first in line for it.
Damn, dude.
No, but seriously, this is a book that is more exciting, not just because the cover is super cool, because the design pulls you in.
Not because it makes
cool. Super cool.
Okay, if you guys,
yeah.
Oh yeah. We'll sell this as like the new cure to impotence. Like who needs Viagra? Who needs Cialis? If you have erectile dysfunction, buy a copy of this book, and your problems are solved. Okay.
And speaking of like not selling it for what it is, this is High Concept has nothing on this because people are going to open this book and it's kind of a bloody Pam book where there's a lot of gunfire, lots of blood. This is not what we're hyping it up to be, but that cover's great. There's no getting around it. So I have to bring it up. And
no, that's a beautiful cover.
Definitely. And I think that's part of what makes this book so exciting. You've done great work with the writing. There's, like Scoop was saying, it has all the elements of a great book. And it's got all the great characters. It's got a few plot twists. It's accessible, which is what I think indie comics really need to tap more into. And I want to talk a little bit more about, behind the scenes of this book and your rise as a writer in indie comics, because it's not an easy industry to break into.
No, it's not.
There's not really a guideline where, this is what you need to do it. It's everybody kind of has their own story. And I want to talk a little bit about your story in comics and what got you to this point now of releasing Midnight Western Theater at Scout.
That's a loaded question. Okay, let's get into this. Okay, we got to set the scene. It's 2018, the worst year of my life. I am a student at a joint university program with the Sorbonne and NYU. I am in Paris, France, and I am losing my goddamn mind. And I'm like, I do not want to be here. So I would go to a cafe every single day because I thought the barista was pretty. And I would order a coffee and I would just think about how to save my life from not being utterly ruined. And I was like, I love comic books. I always loved comic books. So I'm like, I'm just gonna risk it all. If I'm gonna say no to what I planned out to do, I'm just gonna risk it all and do what I want to do. So I left the program. I got my refund, which was my main objective at the point, get my money back. And I moved to Brooklyn, and I'm like, I'm gonna write comics. And then a year after that, nothing's happening. And I'm like, this is awesome. The starving artist life, nothing, everything's going great. And as time went on, I guess the best advice is you just got to keep trying and putting yourself out there until somebody somewhere eventually says yes, and just hold on to whatever yes you can get. I know before that I took like small jobs writing copy and whatever. But by the time the first book I made was Villain Seeking Hero, and I pitched that to everybody. And here's a piece of advice for everybody. If you want to break into comics, don't make a superhero book. Don't do that, because no indie publisher wants a superhero book. Unless you're like a big name writer, like what's his face? Kyle Higgins, like I've created the greatest new superhero of the modern day. And Image is like, he's right. And then he gets like a 5-star treatment with a red carpet and everything. You're not going to get that if you want to start out. No, the
Radiant Black is good, and you should check it out.
It is good. I'll say that. And where was I? So there I am with the superhero book. And then finally, after a while, Action Lab was the first company to be like, "Yeah, we'll take it." And I'm like, "Awesome, finally!" And then I mentioned this earlier, right before it's about to come out, pandemic. So they released it digitally, and that was pretty much my first. I guess that's my very lackluster breaking into the industry. I broke into the industry while it was on fire. That's the greatest way to describe it, you know. And after like a whole bunch of chicanery, like that all came, that book just got fucked over, and like I just took my rights back and I left, and I'm like, okay, I'll do something with this eventually. Meanwhile, I in the background, I'm like, oh, Goth Cowboys, la la la, fun, back burner project. Never gonna worry about this because this is just my fun time project. And I just got an email. I got an email from Scout a few weeks before like the industry shut down. So like the second the offer was on the table and Villain Seeking Hero was done, and like Scout's like, hey, we got a job for it. We got this. We have this opportunity for him. Like, yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Let's Goth Cowboys. Yeah, let's make that. And that's how that went. And I'm making it sound like like I did it out of desperation, which is somewhat true. But in the end, like Scout's a pretty good company. I'll say like that company, between working with them and Action Lab, that Scout is just leagues above, and they are making tremendous waves of progress with expanding their company and with the books they're releasing now. So I'm very happy to be there. I mean, like, we mentioned the merchandise, like to have a t-shirt with like my characters on it, like that's like a moment of disbelief, you know, like, wow. So yeah, I'm very grateful for that. But that's how I broke into the industry, just by being an idiot and just stumbling into success. Or not, it's not even success, just stumbling into like opportunity. I feel that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Because sorry, but just to sum it up, like unless you're like, I always like Christopher Cantwell's story. Like I listened to your last podcast and he's like, I wanted to write a comic book. So I spoke to Karen Berger of Vertigo, and then we made a book. Like, that's not going to happen to most people. Like, you're not going to speak to the godmother of the Sandman and Preacher and Swamp Thing and whatever else she did, and then get your book. No, like, you just got to make something. And you know, it's sad to say, sometimes you're not going to get yes from anybody. And then I guess the at least you could do is self-publish and promote the hell out of it. You know, if you feel you have a story, and I know I was shitting on, like, if you want to make a superhero book, don't do it. And I know, like, I'm a hypocrite because it's what I want to do. And I'm doing it right now with Villain Seeking Hero. Like, I love that book. I love that story. And no company seems to see it the way I do. But that doesn't, that I don't want to not make it. So I'll make it and I'll put it out. And that makes me at least feel good that it's out into the ether somewhere. And if some people who are interested can get it, they can. And that makes me feel all the better for it. So if there's a story you feel, and I'm talking to the audience, I mean you at home, Steve. Yeah, you if you have a story you feel that only you could tell, then do all you can to tell it. And don't let anybody tell you not to.
Powerful. And who would have thought that was coming from this episode? Like, I mean,
yeah. Everybody at home's crying right now. They're just they're so taken aback. Oh my God. So true. So true. What a genius.
The incredibly famous writer got it right.
He did it. He
I
earned this. Yeah. Okay, what's next?
I
don't know. We're all just sitting here. It's like no dead air, guys. No dead air.
Yeah. Scoop, go ahead.
All right, gotcha. It's a dead air. We can just edit that. Oh, we can edit because we're live now. No worries. With touching on Villain Seeking Hero a little bit. Once or during the time that you're doing Midnight Western Theater, do you see yourself possibly going through like Kickstarter or repitching Villain Seeking Hero to see more issues and to finish the story, kind of to get to see it light of day type deal?
I have excuse me. I have spoken to Scout about possibly bringing it there. I haven't talked to them recently about it. I have a strong suspicion they just want to see how Midnight Western Theater is going to do before they get fully into bed with me,
Sure.
which is perfectly understandable. But I see more and more creators going into Kickstarter. I know we were talking earlier about David Pepos. He has had tremendous success. And who's I hope I'm getting his name right. I believe his name's Stephen Bryant. I know he did the Athena Voltaire series. I know he did. He's a former Action Lab alum as well, and he's had some success with not Action Lab, with Kickstarter. So potentially, but my big fear with doing that is it simply won't find the attention, and and to be real with you, I'm not really like I don't really think like that's gonna. There comes a time at any point where you have to learn to let something go.
Okay.
I feel like with that book, to a certain point, I'm just going to let it go and just worry about other projects. And that'll be very much like, if I can tell like a new volume with it, I will. But if I can't, oh well. I know one thing. I'm very right now, at least, focused more so on the future. Sure. with new projects. And I on the pitching side, I've been mainly pitching a new book. And hoping to find a home for that. I'm waiting to hear back from one publisher to see if that's going to go anywhere. But yeah, I know a little snippet, a little tease, if you will. First book, it's superheroes. Whoa, fun. Second book, supernatural Western. Wowie. Third book, sci-fi. We're going to space. That's where we're going. And that book, I really hope to tell. That story, I hope to tell a lot. It's just going to be the way it pitches, just 9 issues, just a flat story. The working title is Astroverse. Whoa! If anybody steals that, I'm going to sue you. So don't.
Now, is there 1 A in Astroverse or 2 A's in Astroverse? I just want to make sure I write this down so you know.
Yeah, just going to contact my lawyer real quick.
Yeah.
And we're just going to see what happens.
That's a really great point. I notice I see it a lot more with people wanting to do more indie comics. We talked to Chip Zdarsky and Jason Liu on their Afterlift book that's getting published by Dark Horse now, came out from Comixology. Chip Zdarsky talked about a pretty cool point that I hadn't put together a lot, in that a lot of writers tend to get themselves into a genre niche where they're doing superheroes and that's what they do, or they do horror and that's what they do, but we don't really consume content like that or media like that. And he wanted to explore, because it's hard to pinpoint what a Zdarsky book is. Right. And he's kind of been all over the place. And it sounds like you have this approach to storytelling that leans more in that direction, where you're bouncing around a lot. Do you feel like that gives you troubles in your pitching, or do you feel like that actually broadens your scope as a writer?
Even though I'm the incredibly famous writer, Loui Southard, nobody gives a shit about who I am. So I'll just come in and be like, I have an idea, and they don't have a certain expectation at all. So at this point, it's all fair game for me.
Yeah.
But I do believe in very much diversifying what you are able to write, and in terms of your imagination, what you can come up with. And I think exploring new genres is a great way to do that, especially genres you're not exactly that keen on writing, I guess. For me, right, I'm not a big fantasy fan, you know? I Lord of the Rings, boo, don't like it. Sorry, everybody. Cancel me on Twitter. Cancel Lewis. Do it. #
Well, that's the end of episode 118 of the Comic Walkers Show. We will no.
Yeah. I get an email. Midnight Western Theater's been canceled. You know, you're fired. Yeah, these problematic statements you've been saying online, you're out of here. But but the book I'm working, the scripts I've been writing recently, all fantasy and magic. because I'm like,
Oh.
I'm not a fan, but because of that, it just makes me want to write it even more. And I learn about things in different like ways. Like I mentioned Lord of the Rings. Like while I don't like it, there is something to learn as a writer from Tolkien and his ability to world build and to create like certain like magical species and lore. Like I feel with writing, and I'm not even though I'm not the world's. I don't want to say like, oh, I'm the expert on writing, so listen up. But the way my approach is like, I like to read and research a lot of things I wouldn't do like naturally based on my own interests, because I feel even though I'm not interested in it, there's still something to learn from it, and that's the way to go. But yeah, what was the original thing was arrange. Yeah, I liked and it's also just to keep myself interested. Like you don't want to write like you don't get. I mean, you work. I think with superhero comics, at least with the big two companies, you have a little bit of leeway because each book is like a superhero book in this genre, or at least you could tell it that way. Which is, I think, a good reflection of the films, the superhero films as well. That's a whole tangent. But for me, just getting interested, it's like, okay, I just want to explore this genre and see what happens. So like with scripts I've written and things I've written, I've done superhero, but that's not even like, when I look at, okay, I have Villain Seeking Hero. I hate to keep bringing up Villain Seeking Hero. This is supposed to be Midnight Western Theater talk, but that book's been a big backbone of my career. And somebody like wrote a review and said, this is not a superhero book. Like it looks like one, but it's not, because it's more like a character study. And it's like, okay, they got it. Because that's the point. Like if you're going to do something like that, at least spin it in a way that's interesting and new. So that's the way I kept myself interested. I made it a comedy drama about these like specific characters with specific problems. With Midnight Western Theater, I wanted to write a Western. How do you make it different? Make it supernatural. Like that's the way to go. Make it goth and see if people love it. And that's what we did. With Astroverse, it's like, okay, Astroverse, the pitch I wrote, it's pretty much my my hate letter to sci-fi and just like different like movies and things. Like, okay, I'm just gonna bastardize Star Trek and Star Wars and all these tropes and cliches. Even Buck Rogers doesn't escape my wrath in that book. So it's that sort of like thing. I'm like, okay, but it's not very spiteful and crude. It's like a very mixed message letter to sci-fi. I like the fantasy book I wrote. I think I wrote in my notes, I wrote like 4 different things. I'm like, this is The Witcher meets Spawn meets Berserk meets some other shit. I don't remember. And like, just so going with that. And then I wrote a magic. My new fun book, Midnight Western Theater, was the original fun book. My new fun book is about like 2 wizards who are dating and you're like, oh, that's fun. It's about magic. And the book's actually like, the woman wizard acts like she gets pregnant, and the book's all about the fears of parenting and being like a young parent. Like, am I prepared to be a parent? And all the magical stuff is the backdrop. Like there's all these villains coming up. Like we must get our revenge on the 2 main characters. And then meanwhile, the 2 characters are like, hey, we should tell our parents that you're pregnant and see what happens. And then it's like, okay, let's go do that. Blah, blah, blah. And then the book ends. It's like, And now we will lay down the 100-year nightmare war that they'll never see coming. And it's just this odd juxtaposition. But I guess the main thing I've been writing is noir. I wrote an OGN, an original graphic novel for those not in the know. And it's just, I think a good thing I like to do is just like, what's the basic idea? And then you just come up with a whole story around that basic idea. So with the noir book, it was like alcoholic detective blacks out, and during the blackout, he got hired for a case. And when he comes to, he has to figure out what the hell the case even was so he can solve it. And then it just sends him down this rabbit hole of problems that he has to solve.
Oh my,
I see you writing that down. You're going to contact your lawyer about that too, eh?
Scoop taking notes.
Yeah, it's like, okay, going to call him up. Like, It's like
I got some
Richie,
great ideas coming down the pipeline, by the way. Some great ideas.
It's like, Richie, alcoholic detective, get a copyright on that. We need it. $1 billion idea.
Yeah.
So we're closing in on our hour here. I want to bring the discussion just back to Midnight Western Theater before we close out.
Oh yeah, we were talking about that, weren't we?
Yeah, we're talking about a Western, a horror. That's what we're into right now. But if you have somebody pick this book up, what do you hope they take out of it?
Oh, that's a good question. I just hope people who read it have a great time. I just want. I forget if this was on there off the air, but like the main word that when I think of this book, I think of fun, and I just want people to read it and have fun. And sure, there are some more dark elements and some more touching elements at times. I just want people to have like just a rip-roaring good time and just to enjoy it. And despite it being such a high concept, nuanced book, I just want people to take it as just like looking at your face. It's like, what was that? Like, anyway, yeah. I just want people to read it and just be like, that was just fun. And I don't want to undermine it and make it sound like this is a blockbuster book. Like this is turn your brain off and just look at the pictures and go, this is the book to the extreme, guys. Enjoy it. Like, no, like I want you to actually read it and enjoy the story and pick up on things, but it's not overbearing. It's very much the right sort of, I think when you use the word like accessible, I think that's the great way to describe it. And it's an accessible book. You can have a good time. And if you want a little bit more, you can pick and prod and find the greater meaning inside of it, if there even is a meaning. And if you find your own, you can DM me on Twitter and tell me what you thought the book was about. That's always fun.
It is. It absolutely is. Or you can just say how excited you are for it, like I did, and thank you for responding.
No. I don't want any positive reception. Don't tell me you like the book. Don't tell me you're excited for it. I just want people to tell me to quit while I'm ahead. That's all I want.
Stop it already. Just stop it already.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been a lot of fun to talk to you about this, and I'm so excited for everybody to check the book out. Midnight Western Theater at Scout. It's coming March 17th. And it's going to be one to have on your pull list.
Right. I don't sorry. I don't know if it's still if it's been cut off yet. Mm-hmm. It probably has. But go to your store and walk up to your counter clerk and say, I want this book. And if they don't have it, make sure you tell them to get it. And then everybody will order a copy. And then I'll be rich. And then I'll never have to make a comic ever again. I'll just flee to Russia with my wife and 7 children and retire. That's all I want.
You heard it here first. That's the grand plan.
That's the end game.
Okay. I'm going to close this episode.
That's enough.
We can end it at. I'm going to give a quick shout out. Thanks to our sponsors here at Comic Watch, because it's a great time for that. We've got Carson's Corner, Lemon Juice Comics, and Frankie's Comics. Thank y'all so much for your support. And the listeners, go check out some indie comics. We talk a lot about Marvel and DC, and Midnight Western Theater is just another example of some of the awesome and accessible indie comics that you can pick up at your local comic shop and just have a good time with. So, Loui Southard, thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure to have you.
Well, wait, can I shout out my stuff real quick?
Absolutely. Shout out anything you'd like.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Once again, I'm Loui Southard. And Midnight Western Theater coming out March 17th. If you just like the visuals, we've got a ton of merch on the Scout Comics website. There's going to be a lot of variants for the book as well. I think you can order them directly on the Scout Comics website. We've got some killer artists on those. Vasco Georgiev, he's a rising star in comic art. Heather Vaughn, amazing designer. Ben Matsuya, longtime collaborator. He probably did my favorite. It's a tarot card inspired cover for Midnight Western Theater. And David Hahn did one, and I think that's it. Villain Seeking Hero. We mentioned it a couple times. If you want to check it out, it's on Gumroad. Loui Southard on Gumroad, and Loui Southard or Louis J. Southard and Loui Southard on social media. You can find me. I'm there, and I'm just ranting and raving to no one. So I'm sure you'll find me.
We found you, and I'm so glad we were able to get you on the show. And hopefully we can do it again. Maybe follow up after the last issue of Midnight Western Theater.
Yeah, when the trade's coming out.
Yeah, that'll be a good time. Hopefully we can follow up and touch on some issues after issue 2.
Yeah, we could find out if the book is actually good or not after reading the whole thing. I'm sure that'll be a big surprise. And please invite, even if you read all 5 issues and are like, that was bullshit, and like invite me on and let me know. That would be awesome. I'd love to hear
that. Okay, Loui Southard, thanks so much for joining us. That was episode 118 of the Comic Watchers Show. As always, please head out, support your local comic book shop. They need the support right now. If you can't get to a local comic shop, head on to Comixology. They have a ton of books. Look out for some indie comics, and maybe you'll find Midnight Western Theater. Thank y'all so much.